The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.
Welcome back to Up the Cherries in all departments, Cherries fans, and thank you for joining us. Now, of course, we do have a very, very special show, and welcome to all our friends from Everton as well. Now, with me today from the Toffee Blues, I have got Steve. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm good, mate. Yeah, I'm a lot better the last couple of weeks after some good results. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
Not a problem at all. My pleasure. My pleasure. And one thing that we are going to discuss today is a man that has returned to Goodison Park after 12 years out. But he did spend a good, I think it was 11 years at the club beforehand. He joined in 2002, didn't he? And then eventually went to Manchester United in 2013. But he is back. But I'll tell you what, let me start off with the most obvious question first. And let's cover the outgoing manager, Sean Dyche. Now, I've been on your show. We've done the preview. And one thing that, is quite adamant to pretty much every football fan out there was that Sean Dyche was taking Everton nowhere. Of course,
Yeah.
we played you guys at the start of January, and I'm going to say it as it is, Steve. It was terrible football. It was frustrating. You defended very well, but there was no outlet in attack. 0 shots on target, and on the form, even though we only beat you 1-0,
It should have been more.
Well, yeah, it was one of those games where you had Jordan Pickford, probably the best goalkeeper, in the Premier League at this moment in time, in my honest opinion. Because he's had a lot of practice this season, hasn't he? But the defence have been quite solid. But Sean Dyche, were you of the agreement with me that if he had stayed any longer, that Everton would be looking down the barrel of relegation at the end, final season in Goodison Park, and could have been playing Championship football at Bramley Moore?
Yeah, I was fully under that persuasion. And you know what I think really annoyed me towards the end of his reign, Craig, is that there was so many people on social media who didn't watch Everton every week and weren't Everton supporters, who seemed to know more about our football club than we did, and telling us that by sacking Sean Dyche, there's a really famous tweet now, from the day he was sacked, Everton have just opened the door to relegation, and of course now it seems like a distant past, and that's the difference that David Moyes has made. Dyche was taking us down. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We seem to be backs against the wall all the time, just waiting to concede. And like you said there, we defended well against Bournemouth at the Vitality until we didn't. And then David Brooks scored, and we were never going to find a way back into the game. So yeah, he was going to take us down. We're now looking up towards mid-table rather than back over our shoulders, and it's a very nice feeling.
That probably hits the nail on the head for me, is that it was frustrating trying to get that first goal. But once we did, I felt, against most teams in the Premier League, you will feel that, if you have a couple of scary moments, then you have got that opportunity to throw away the 3 points. It never felt like it that day. And Everton Football Club are a very, very proud football club, a good football club. And the style that Sean Dyche was implementing just was absolutely horrendous. It was on par with when he eventually left Burnley. There is going to be those people out there, though, Steve, that are going to turn around and they're going to say, Yeah, but you drew against Man City, you drew against Arsenal, you drew against Chelsea. What would be your answer to them?
Bournemouth battered Man City. Lots of teams have battered Man City this season. The other day they got battered 5-1 by Arsenal. The question from an Everton standpoint is, going into that game, why didn't we try and beat Man City? We conceded early, and Iliman Ndiaye, who's been absolutely superb this season, one of the best players I've seen in an Everton shirt in years, was able to get us back into the game with a stunning goal. Bar that bit of absolute magic from him, we were poor. You know, there was a bit going on towards the end of the game where we were 4-on-1. We could have won the game, and the squad had no confidence, and we missed the chance. And they're the chances that you miss, and they mean a lot. The Arsenal game, I was quite impressed. Not sure how we came out of that with a point, but the Chelsea game we maybe could have scored as well. So Sean Dyche there was definitely better against playing the big teams. He was definitely was capable of getting points. I mean, we beat Liverpool 2-0 last season. First time in 12 years we did that. And, you know, I think people will look at us and go, maybe you should have stuck with him. But really, I mean, they don't know what it means to be an Everton manager, what it means to be at this football club. Everton's got a way that consumes you the second you step foot inside Goodison Park. The second you're a fan, or you put that shirt on, there's a culture and there's an ethos that we stand and that's our motto, nothing but the best. And he was, I think, by the end, quite happy to say, this isn't my best, but this is what you're getting. And I think, to be honest, anyone who claims that it was a bad idea to sack him hasn't watched enough of Everton Football Club in the last year, because really it was depressing. It was you couldn't get up to support your team. I wasn't looking forward to going to Goodison Park. I was more dreading it. It felt like a job. I felt like I was going to work. Now it feels like, you know, we're reminiscing in some of the old David Moyes teams, and we're getting results, and we're on the front foot. I mean, 3-0 up at half time in 2 home games. Absolutely unheard of. David Moyes has won the same amount of games in a month that Sean Dyche did in 6. And to be honest, I think if you would have had to have watched Everton every week to notice how bad we were getting, and we were slipping closer and closer. And now I'm talking to Leicester fans and Ipswich fans and Wolves fans and going, yeah, that was us, and we were worse than you. And I watched Leicester at the weekend, and I thought, they're bad, and we were getting that bad as well. And I'm sick of having these relegation slug matches towards the end of the season every year. And I wanna be able to sit on my deck chair on the 18th of May against Southampton and wave goodbye to Goodison Park with fondness, instead of it being a relegation match again. And I think that's what David Moyes is doing. He's getting us some points on the board. He's making us have a bit of belief going into games like this in the FA Cup. And all around, it's just a bit of a better feeling at the club. You can sit and watch Match of the Day, and I don't know how many times I've watched that third Beto goal from Saturday's game. And I can say that, you know, I was pretty much ready to unfollow all the club's social media under Dyche, because there was nothing they were ever posting that was making me proud to be an Evertonian. But a bit similar to what you're probably going through at the minute, Craig, that if you could have Sean Dyche as your manager, would you? No, you probably you wouldn't.
No way.
You wouldn't you? So it's the same question for me. If we can have David Moyes, who's doing what he's doing and really bringing hope back, why would we have stuck with him? You know, I think really it comes from other teams thinking, we don't want Everton to challenge, we don't want Everton to be up there, and you know, they want Everton to do badly, and that's why they probably would have liked Sean Dyche to stay, because we would have just kept getting worse.
Well, I picked up on Sean Dyche and what he was like, you know, back in August when we played you. And I'm sorry to remind you of this game, Steve. You know where I'm going. The 3-2 win for Bournemouth, where you was 2-0 up. Now, I personally thought so far this season that is Bournemouth's worst performance. However, and this is what I think of Sean Dyche, is although Iriola's substitutions were good, Sean Dyche's were pretty much suicidal, weren't they? With why in a million years would you take off Iliman Manjai when he's absolutely running the show there? It was just ridiculous, wasn't it, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, we said it on our channel before the game in January. Obviously, that was the reverse fixture, and we were talking about that game in August. Honestly, it's giving me shivers up my spine now. We were 3-0 up against Tottenham the other week, and we were 3-0 up against Tottenham, and I was sitting there, and the fans were still. And I mean, we did let two late goals in, but the difference was we didn't let a third in, and we managed to get out with all 3 points. So for us to look back at that game and see how well we did to get the 2 goals, then Bournemouth get back into it. He takes off Iliman Ndiaye and he leaves Tim Boonamon, who was finished. He'd ran his race. He needs to come off, and he got his substitutions all wrong. And Bournemouth had a bit of belief with the first, and then went and got 2 more, and I think they deserved it, because if you're gonna be 2-0 up and play that badly when you're 2-0 up, you don't deserve to win. Then, of course, the Tottenham game, 3-0 up, we let 1 in, bad defending. We let a second one in. It's a bit of a scrappy one from Richarlison. He doesn't quite know what to do when he scored it. And then we didn't let a third one in, and we managed to get out with all 3 points. Then against Leicester, 3-0 up at half time again, and I'm thinking, please learn your lesson. Please learn your lesson from the last game. And we did. We stayed on the front foot. Leicester had their chances, but we looked like always like we were going to be the next team to score again, and we did, and we got a 4th, and that's been the transformation in so little time. But that Bournemouth game was just a calamity, and that was the beginning of the end, really, for Sean Dyche. He'd done a pretty good job last year with what he had, and also the points deductions, of course, and of course I'm grateful for him, because a lot of managers wouldn't have been able to keep us up there. But this season, it was completely different. I can't even describe what the difference was, Craig. But last year we were more solid and we had a game plan. It feels like this year everyone came back a bit lethargic, and no one was really following the game plan anymore. And Sean Dyche had done his remit, and then went, "This is it. No, I'm bored." But then, of course, these games were going ahead, and we're staying ahead. And I'm like, wow, you can sit there at 3-0 up at half time without that element of dread. And I think, to be honest, that Bournemouth game, it's had a horrible traumatic effect on me, because we sat there at half time, and we said the same thing against Tottenham as well. I think we've got a draw out of this one.
Yeah. You
shouldn't be saying that when you're 3-0 up, but really, I mean, the change has been absolutely phenomenal in terms of the mentality from the team. The likes of O'Brien coming in for Ashley Young. Tarkovsky seems to be a new man. Branthwaite looks more solid. Garner Gay has been absolutely phenomenal. I don't know, he seems to be rolling back the years with how he's playing. And Jai is the star of the team. Lindstrom, I mentioned in our video, he seems to have been given a task to do, and he's doing it. And Beto, honestly, I wrote him off in my video last week, because obviously Dominic Calvert-Lewin's probably played his last game for Everton now. He'll be off at the end of the season, probably to the likes of a West Ham or a Bournemouth maybe. But Beto last week, I said, isn't going to do it. We need to get a replacement before the window ends. And he put Beto out, and Beto looked like someone who had gone, oh, my nearest competition's out injured here, I'm going to have to play. and I'm going to have to do something with it. And they were playing to his strengths, Craig. They were putting the ball in front of him and letting him run onto it. We weren't hitting him with 60-mile-an-hour balls into his head and expecting him to do something with it. He was able to run onto things and finish them 1 and 2 touch. Both his goals were 1 touch, from about 18 yards out. And best game I've seen him have for us since he signed. And that really just comes down from good coaching. We mentioned it with Iraola, with Ouattara and Semenyo, and Evan Nielsen coming to replace Solanke, and I think he's done pretty well. Cook moving to right back. And I'm looking at the players in Bournemouth's team and going, no real big stars coming from abroad who got the most amazing history in the game and have been round the block, but they've all got a job to do and they're all doing it. And Justin Kluivert, we mentioned there, always seemed like he was going to be one that was always just potential. Yeah. He's come in and Andoni Iraola has said to him, do this, and when this happens, do this. And when you get the ball here, do that. And he's doing the job that a manager's meant to do. And we've seen it now. I think he's one of the top wingers in the league.
And I think that it really shines on what is a good manager. David Moyes is a great manager, coming in and doing what he has with Lindstrom and kind of transforming his style. I've seen, parts of the games that Everton have been in after Moyes has taken over, and it's completely the opposite of what Sean Dyche was doing. It's more effective, as you say. It's more controlled. It's more managed, and it's a far, far, far better watch. But going back to Moyes' early days as well, and at Everton, of course, he took over from Walter Smith. I remember this quite well back in 2002, and Walter Smith Everton were down the bottom of the Premier League the majority of the season. It did look like it was going to be a little bit touch and go. He'd never dropped into the relegation zone that season, but again, Moyes kind of transformed things back then. Back then, of course, he was not largely unknown, but of course he'd been at Preston and he'd come in and was working with a lot bigger club, a lot more expectation. Of course, this was only 5 years or 6 years after the FA Cup win in 1995, which we was remembering Paul Rideout scoring that goal against Manchester United. And that's what he does, isn't it? He's one of these managers that West Ham fans, I don't think, really understood him. He's one of these managers that looks after his players and gets the best out of his players, a little bit like Iraola does.
Yeah, a little bit. But bar the Aston Villa game, I think it's been quite similar. I mean, in his first season, we finished 17th. I think we were about 6 or 7 points clear by the end of it. But I remember growing up, and Everton were always 4th or 5th. And we were looking out for your Villas, your Tottenhams. Have they won? Going to the Europa League games and sitting there and clapping when the goals went in the Europa League. And now that seems like a million miles away. But I remember saying to me dad, we were talking a bit about Moyes. I was just a little lad then. I'd just gone to sort of my first few games. And he said, yeah, well, you got to remember we finished 17th in his first season. And I was like, oh my, Everton can go that low. I hadn't even looked at that half of the table. And I'm thinking now, he's come in and he's probably going to finish around the same place. But he came in, his first game was the game against Fulham.
Yes.
And David Unsworth scored after about 15 odd seconds. And then Duncan Ferguson got the second. We managed to get the win in the first one. And you look at it now, and he's come in, immediately put a stamp and put players in the team that he's going, I know you'll do a job for me. I know you'll do a job for me. And I can guarantee you now, Craig, 7 or 8 of those players in that Everton team aren't David Moyes players. But he's managing to work with them.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at your Decore's, your Mikalenko's. Ashley Young won't be at the club much longer. Not that he was ever really one to use players like that, really. Maybe Phil Neville. Beto was one that he was frustrated with when he first came in. Harrison isn't really a David Moyes player. The list goes on, and he's managing to get, tunes out of these players and get them playing a bit. And now whenever something happens, or I just think back to, that 4 or 5 years into the Moyes reign, and I can name the whole team off to you, and I look back and I go, he's him. So Iliman and Jai is Stephen Pienaar down to an absolute T.
Oh yeah.
The way the ball sticks to him, the way he wins fouls, the goals he scores, he's Stephen Pienaar. James Garner on Saturday, an absolute identical performance to the one that Mikel Arteta would have had. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, he's picking his players here for who's going to be in my team come the next transfer window. He came in, and there was about 2 or 3 transfers lined up for him, Craig. Yeah. There was Ernest Nuama from Lyon. He was the big one, where he came in and he said, "No, let me have a look." Because honestly, Craig, if you were to ask it a neutral, who's one club that wastes money on rubbish players, you'd say Everton Football Club. Yeah. And he came in and he went, "This lad, I'm 20 million. And he looked at him and he went, "No, I don't want him." And the transfer was dead in the water. Mm-hmm. Because Moyes looked at him and went, "He's not my player. He's not a David Moyes player. He's not an Everton player. He's not going to fit in here." We didn't sign anyone, and the last couple of days we were able to get Carlos Alcaraz in. And really I wasn't sure, because he was obviously at Southampton, and I was thinking, was relegated. He's obviously from Argentina, doesn't speak much English. And I'm thinking, is he really a player that we want? And then I looked and I said, 22 years old, he's got the mentality of an Everton player. He likes playing in front of a big crowd. He's got the bottle. Maybe Southampton just wasn't, the type of team that he'd fit well into, especially with how they've been recently, which I'm sure you're pretty happy about, that they seem to not be able to buy a goal at the minute. But and I'm looking and going, okay, he's looked at this Alcaraz and he's gone, yeah, he's a player I want. And that was what he always did. We're talking about the same man who signed Leighton Baines, Phil Jagielka and Stephen Pienaar on the same day. Mm. And we're thinking, God, they're 3 of the stalwarts of this century in terms of Everton. Leighton Baines is my favourite footballer of all time. And he come in and he went, what can I do here? He got Alan Irvine back, who was the assistant coach at Everton for a long time. He got Leighton Baines in, and he said, I'm going to have Leighton Baines on the coaching staff. We will review it again at the end of the season. And I thought, isn't that brilliant that he's coming and he's not gone, well, let's have Baines, because the fans are like him. They've gone, can he do a job? And he's gone, right, well, he's under 18s manager. I know how he works. He knows how I work. We'll put him in there, and we'll see how he does. And at the end of the season, if he has to go back to the under 18s manager, then he will. Because he's ruthless, and he always has been. And he knows a player when he sees one. I remember, I can name them off to you now. There's Jelavic, Naismith, Arteta, Pienaar, Jagielka, Dan Gosling he brought through, of course, had a fantastic career. There's Osmonds, Jack Rodwells, who went on to be sold for about 20 million. Jolyon Lescott, all these players are all David Moyes players, and really, I can count on one hand the amount of duds he had in his last tenure as Everton manager. A lot of it was before my time, but I know what he plays like, because I had about 5 solid years of it. And it's making me feel old, because there's now people sitting around me who go, oh, I'm 18 now. He was 6 when I left. I was 6 when he left, and I'm going, oh my word. You're telling me you can't remember David Moyes? And you think 23 years ago in football, is a long, long time. Football was a very different one then, different game then, but he's able to move with the times, I think, and he's able to come in and he knows how to get results. And whilst if this was a different manager, you may go, oh, it's a new manager bounce. David Moyes understands Everton Football Club, and Everton Football Club gets David Moyes, and it's just one of those managers that will just always exist in football. I think the way he talks about Goodison Park and the way he talks about Everton in his interviews, he knows what is required, and that's the main thing. And he knows when he's doing poorly, and he knows when he's doing well. Although really, in his last one, we were just missing success. He was always steady for us. We were never down there. We were never doing poorly. There was never really calls for his head. We were just missing out on that UEFA Cup that we could have had in 08. The FA Cup we could have had in 09. The Champions League run we could have had in 05. And that was really it with David Moyes. And he went to West Ham. And I remember West Ham fans asking me about David Moyes. And I said, he's alright, but he won't win anything. And they were like, why? And I was like, David Moyes is allergic to trophies. That's what I said. And he doesn't win trophies. Every time we got near a trophy, we'd bottle it. But you'll be a steady team, you'll be fine. You'll finish in Europe, but you won't win the trophy. And then they won the trophy. So that's the difference with him now. And I think maybe he's come along a bit in his career as a football manager. And you know what? Honestly, we can talk till we're blue in the face about these results against Leicester and Tottenham and Brighton. I'd swap them all for a win at the weekend and one against Liverpool as well. Just if he delivers that FA Cup trophy, then really, I mean, yeah, that would be the special moment. If he can do that, that's the one that I really want.
To be honest, I could see that actually happening. And although I would absolutely love to see us get to Wembley, even be a semi-final, which I don't think semi-final should be played at Wembley. But hey, Steve, if we got to a semi-final, played at Wembley in the FA Cup, had a chance of winning something, winning a trophy, winning some silverware, that would be, I'd be absolutely made up with that.
You can win the Europa League next season, Craig. Well, when the Cherries win the Europa League next season.
But, even thinking back to, those years, and especially one player that really sticks out for me, and a player that I don't think particularly was great under Walter Smith, is Thomas Gravesen. Now, Thomas Gravesen, David Moyes turned him into a player who then was sold to Real Madrid and completely transformed him. He was a solid midfielder. It was the Moyes side of players back then. Duncan Ferguson, I think, was even more prolific than he already was. To be honest, Duncan Ferguson's always been a very, very good goal scorer, but he was made even more prolific towards the tail light of his career by Moyes. Tim Cahill. And of course, you did have that run where you finished fourth in the Premier League, only to be very unfairly knocked out by Villarreal. We was talking a bit before, wasn't we, about that game, and it it really pissed me off. That game did. It ruined my evening, to be fair.
Go watch it, Cherries fans, if you haven't seen it. It's probably, and I know I'm a bit biased, but it's probably the worst refereeing decision of all time. And yeah, we were unfortunately dumped out in the qualifying round of the Champions League, and we never got to play. But I mean, you look at if you want to know about Gravesen, the real test was he got sent off in Moyes' first game.
Yeah.
We had to play the rest of the game with 10 men. He got sent off in the first half. So the difference with him then, and then he moved to Real Madrid. I mean, it's a bit before my time, and so is Ferguson, but for me, David Moyes knew how to sign an Everton player. Everton players are skillful, put the effort in every week, wear the heart on their sleeve, but you have to have a level of ability as well. So I'm looking at the likes of Pienaar, I'm looking at the likes of Cahill, Arteta, those players. And he was just great at signing those players, really, and he knew what an Everton player was. Leighton Baines is another one. Seamus Coleman, I mean, arguably the greatest signing in Premier League history is Seamus Coleman, £60,000 for a player that would go on to be our club captain and one of the greatest, in terms of this generation, players that we've ever had.
I just wanted to take a moment out of your enjoyment of this video to tell you about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks, the leading dental surgery in the whole of Bournemouth and Poole. Visit them at dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Also, check out Touchpoint Telecoms, who are also sponsoring our Canva. You can find them at touchpointtelecoms.co.uk for all your business telephone needs across the whole of the southeast and southwest of the UK and beyond. Now, let's get back to the video. Well, of course, Moyes did leave Everton back in 2013 to go to Manchester United. And I know that there was, and I remember there was a lot of frustration. It was Moyes was handpicked out by Sir Alex Ferguson as his replacement. I personally feel that Moyes wasn't given enough time there. And if Moyes was given the time that he had at Everton, he would have done a decent job. Do you agree with me on that? And what was the resentment against Moyes for going to Man United?
This I can tell you a lot about because this is sort of my prime Everton supporting era. So his last season at Goodison, we played pretty well. I think we finished 7th that season. Yeah. He was handpicked by Ferguson, and if you want to talk about, I always knew he wouldn't do well because I think the job was. While Everton is a huge club, the Man United job is very different. You expected immediate success. With Everton, we've sort of been now, after so many years of not really winning anything, conditioned to sort of let people have a bit more of a chance. With the United one, he went to United and firstly, it was an aging squad, I think, and also he was expected to be able to deliver elite results against elite clubs in his first season, and he wasn't going to do that. And I mentioned it to you there. It was too early for him, I think. I mentioned there what I said to the West Ham fan, David Moyes doesn't win trophies, and back then he didn't. That season, the last season he left, we were dumped out the FA Cup in the quarters 3-0 to Wigan Athletic, who went on to win it. I remember there was people stood outside the ground selling coach tickets to Wembley before we'd even got there, and really, I think in terms of him leaving for Man United, it was too early for him, and I think really, had he have had a few more years at Everton, he probably would have become a much better football manager in the current climate that football is now. Nowadays, he's a really good football manager, and everyone knows how good he is. But he's a bit old, and he's coming towards the last bit of his career now. When he went to United and we got Martinez, it felt quite poetic because, as I said, he just won the FA Cup, which we were dying to do. He played this forward, expansive football. You know, he'd play like the likes of John Stones, Ross Barkley, Romelu Lukaku, all these players that were really, you know, Barkley and Stones were under Moyes, but they became Martinez players. And in Everton's eyes, it was a way of us moving on from Moyes, we pinned him as sort of a negative manager. Mm-hmm. So a little bit similar to what we'd say about Dyche now, that every time we would get towards a little bit of success, we couldn't do it. We couldn't handle that final hurdle because it felt a little bit like we weren't prepared for these big games that we'd go into. So knife to a gunfight, that was what we always said about David Moyes. He'd bring a knife to a gunfight. I think now, 12 years later, he's changed so much. Yeah. In that his style of football was a little bit ahead of its time at that point, I think. Nowadays, he's playing the same way that he did when he left. But it works better in this current climate, if that makes sense. And I think we looked at Martinez as sort of the new messiah who was going to be here for 20, 30 years and deliver loads of titles and stuff like that. When really, Moyes was just handpicked by Ferguson and took the biggest job in the world, and I don't think he was really quite ready for it. And again, some clubs just go together, and I think Everton and David Moyes is one of them, that we were always sort of just destined to have David Moyes as our manager. And while he did really good things with West Ham, you've got a similar sort of ethos. I don't think I think West Ham's a very, very different club in a lot of ways, well, in its similarities as well to Everton. That Everton fans, really, if you speak to me and you speak to another Everton fan, you're pretty much speaking to the same person, because we've all been brought up with this sort of idea, and Moyes has understood that from day one since he moved in. It was just, we'd had a few bad results, we'd lost a few cup finals, semi-finals, gone out of Europe, and it was just a feeling of we're never going to break through that glass ceiling. And I think we went, it's his negative football, that's why we can't do it. And Martinez came in, sort of expected him to be the next big thing. First few years, he did. You know, we finished fifth in his first season, got into Europe. Second season, we got towards the latter stages of the Europa League and got knocked out. We got to 2 semi-finals in his third season and got knocked out of both of them. And then it sort of just went, okay, this fella can't do it either. He's too attacking. And then ever since then, it's just been a ping-pong of relegation managers, really. And we don't think we really knew what we had with either of them. But that's the standard we want to be playing at. And the standard that Bournemouth are playing at now, really. And we expected ourselves to get higher. It just ended up getting lower. And now we've replaced David Moyes with David Moyes, which is the most Everton thing that we could have possibly done.
Well, to be honest, David Moyes, like you say, is synonymous with Everton. It's a little bit like Eddie Howe. You know, even though he's at Newcastle, he'll be back one day. You know, he will come back to AFC Bournemouth at some point during his career. Do you think that this is really it for David Moyes? As a football manager, this has got to, you know, in my honest opinion, I don't think he will leave Everton for another club. And what do you think he needs to do, especially in the summer, to get ready to move into this new stadium and give it a real go? Because I think that you will be a force to be reckoned with next year.
Listen, Evertonians have learnt from that first spell and the way that he was treated when we left that David Moyes is a very good football manager and he's not a firefighter. He's come in, he's signed a 2.5-year deal. What he needs to do is get the club playing good, attractive football again. Yeah. Get rid of dead wood and get us winning football matches and get us up the table towards those European spots. That's where we want to be operating next season. And it's possible. It's more possible than it was back then. You know, back then there was a top 4. You remember, Craig? It wasn't a top 6 then, it was a top 4. And it was always It was United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs, or Liverpool. Liverpool had a few seasons where they were 7th, 8th, the Dalglish Hodgson sort of era.
Yeah.
And then the other ones, there was always the other ones, which was always us, Villa, and Fulham. Then the rest sort of battled it out. The teams between 9th and 17th always finished really between 9th and 17th, and then maybe one of them would drop out, someone else would come up, and teams would stay in the league a lot longer then. Now, you can't imagine. So say, for example, somebody like, do you remember Gareth Southgate's Middlesbrough back then? Could you imagine Gareth Southgate's Middlesbrough sticking with him in that season and then going and being second in the table the next year? No. Now it can happen, and that was what sort of about the same level that Nuno was operating with Forest last season, wasn't it? I think now we're so capable of doing it, and the league has gotten to the point now where you can just do what Bournemouth have done. You can finish in the Europa League, you can be in the Conference League, you can win the Conference League. What he's got to do is stabilise the team, pick his players, who's going to play, who's not going to play, get the age of the squad down a bit, and look at trying to go into each game with a good mentality and getting points on the board, really. Getting us out of the illusion that Everton are relegation fodder. Basically, he has 2.5 years to turn it round to go, Everton aren't relegation fodder anymore. And I do agree with you. I don't think he'll go to a different club. If it ends with him leaving in a nice way, if he can deliver a trophy, I think it'll be his last job in football. He said, I'm not going to be here for 11 years again, but I'll be here because Everton need me. He wasn't going to come back. He said very verbally in his first conference, I wasn't going to come back to football, but Everton needed me. And it was very much like a break glass in case of emergency thing. And we went, bring him back. And he said, I just couldn't resist because Everton's his club. And he came back, and I think you're right, Craig. I think this is probably going to be his last game, his last club. I hope it is anyway, because I think for him, if he can end his managerial career by taking Everton into Europe, delivering a trophy, and getting us back to believing in our football club again, I think that would be so poetic, and I think it'd be perfect.
Definitely. He might say that he's not going to be doing another 11 years, but do you know what? I don't actually believe him. I think, if it goes well, I think he'll probably stick around, and, he'll try. And, I think managers as well, they get very attached to players and a good squad. And I think that's why Andoni Iraola, there's talk of him potentially going to Spurs. That's all been in the press. I can't see him doing it, because at the end of the day, he's building such a good side here at Bournemouth that why would we want to throw all that away?
It'd be a massive shame, and I think it'd really summarise how football is now. That team managers just can't pick a team and do well with that team, and I think we were lucky because it happened for us with Moyes, where that was the era when you had your Wengers, your Mourinho's, your Ferguson's still. It wasn't a revolving door with football managers back then, and we built that relationship, and now he's come back. And really, I think it's one of the last instances in football of a manager being synonymous with a club, and him, heart on sleeve saying, "This is my club."
Yeah, definitely. Well, I wish Everton all the very, very best for the rest of the season. Of course, we do have this FA Cup game. I think it's going to be a very, very difficult game for AFC Bournemouth. I've got to be honest, Steve. When I saw the 2 balls being picked out and we had you at Goodison Park, I thought straight away, Dyche has gone, it's revenge. This is, I think, going to be a very, very difficult game. And I'm sure Moyes is thinking, we can't actually qualify for Europe through the league. We're not going to get relegated. I think you're going to do.
May as well
more
have a go at it. That's
might
all I want us to do. Have a go at it.
And
Really.
I could see it.
Mate, if we can win this one on Saturday, do you know what? It's going to sound terrible, but if Liverpool go out, I'll start believing then. I know they're playing Plymouth, and that's not going to happen, but I won't believe that we're going to win this trophy until Liverpool are out of it, because they'll always come and bite us. But if all I want is to, I said to somebody last week, I'm that desperate for the trophy, and I'm that desperate. If we beat Liverpool next week in the last derby at Goodison, and we win the FA Cup, I'd happily lose the first 10 at Bramley Moore and play catch up next season, because I wouldn't mind how long the hangover is. This season's what matters.
No, fair enough, mate. Fair enough. Well, like I say, I wish you all the very, very best for the rest of the season. I'm sure relegation, you can forget all about that, and have a go at the cups, maybe at our expense. But of course, I've got my fingers crossed that we'll do it. But if you do beat us on Saturday, I'm sure it would be a fitting end to the season and a fitting end to the time at Goodison Park, one of the best grounds. I've got to be honest, I'm gutted that Everton are leaving Goodison Park, although it might need to happen to progress the club. It's just such an iconic ground, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is. For people my age, it doesn't really carry many good memories, but when you look at the history of it and you look back at old photos and old videos, it deserves one last hurrah, really. And it's a special place. I think it's got a hint of the word escapes me now, but when things need to happen at Goodison, they do happen.
Yeah.
Howard Kendall, former Everton manager, his most famous quote was half time against Bayern Munich in the Cup Winners' Cup semi. He said, "Just go out and the Gladys Street will suck the ball into the back of the net," and that's what it does. It happened last year with Dominic Calvert-Lewin against Liverpool. It happened with him again against Crystal Palace. And you look at it, and it's a special place. And when things need to happen, it can be bad when it's bad, but when it's good, it's a special place to be.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Steve. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you. Do tell everybody, before I let you go, how can everybody find the Toffee Blues?
Yeah, just follow us at Everton Newsfeed on like all our socials, on YouTube as well. There's a video going out with Craig as well to talk about this game, and then follow me as well, Stephen A. Hornby, on all my stuff on like Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We just try and make Everton content. We try and make nice content where we can have stuff like this with different fans on, and remain as impartial as we can and try and give a really good view on the club and all the clubs around us. I think a lot of the fan channels nowadays are a little bit clickbaity at times, but yeah, come and have a look at our content. It is really good, and of course there's a lot of us working on it, and we're all really passionate about it. Definitely.
And go and like and subscribe to the video as well that we did earlier on as well on Steve's channel. But Steve, absolutely pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much, and we'll see you very soon.
The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.